Hello everyone and welcome back to X-Plane 12 on the Half-Baked Sims channel. It's been a while, but we are back and we have a lot of exciting new stuff to go over. A lot of changes in the last couple weeks. Took some time off to figure out my computer. We upgraded from a 2060 to a 3060 Ti. And we purchased a couple new planes, and one of them that you can see is the Rotate MD-11. Ignore the shadows, I can't get that to look better than that. But, yes, we have the Rotate MD-11, one of my most sought after planes that I was really on the fence about buying. I already have the pre-purchased version of the TFDI Designs MD-11 that's supposed to come out later this year, but I thought, why wait? You know, up to 10 months to see that when I could just fly this one. So, oops, sorry, drinking my coffee still. So, a couple things that we had to sort out with the X-Plane. There's another reason that I haven't been flying. I've actually been having trouble with both simulators recently. And I think that that might just be a simulator issue and nothing that I can do with my computers. The issues that I was having in Microsoft Flight Simulator are due to stuttering on the ground. Unless I go to a small airport with not a lot of assets, I'm getting a consistent 40 frames, but every 15 seconds I'm getting a massive stutter. I've tried every fix in the book. I've tried reinstalling it. I've tried doing everything, and I just can't really get it fixed. So I'm trying to see if it's a computer issue. I don't think it is. I look at my task manager the whole time and everything's fine. So the other issue I had in X-Plane was, of course, the wobbling in flight due to the live weather. So the only fix for that is to turn off live weather, turn off winds completely, and then try and replicate the weather in the sim with the manual entry stuff. So that's what we've done here today. Right now, it's actually raining in Dallas, but this is, I don't know, a lot better for flying and a lot better for the visuals of the plane if we can just fly in this mode. So, we'll talk more about the MD-11 as we start getting it booted up and into flight. I think it's an amazing plane. I know it had a really rough launch. I wasn't part of X-Plane's community when it launched. I didn't have it until recently, but I know that this is the subject of a lot of criticism and a lot of praise, depending on how you look at it. When it came out, the plane was basically completely broken. VNav didn't work. It still has issues on descent. That's something we'll talk about later. But when it first came out, it was practically unusable, and over the course of 10 months, it's become a very nice plane that still struggles just a little bit on VNav descent. But that might be something that has to do with the winds. We'll see on descent today what we have to do to manage it. So let's hop into the cockpit here, and we'll get it booted up. We're doing a nice quick flight from DFW to Louisville today. It's actually a real-life flight that I picked out. One of the other things that I really like about... hello... Is this thing gonna work? Oh boy. Let's see, where is our X camera? Hello, number lock. Is that why? Yep. Okay. That's what happened. Alright. What was I saying? Okay, yeah, this is a real life flight I picked out from DFW to Louisville. One of the nice things about the MD-11 is that it actually flies a lot of really short, quick flights. Which is super cool for someone that likes flying bigger planes, but doesn't really like sitting in the plane for 8 hours to fly a realistic version of the flight. It's kind of just one of those nice planes where there's a lot going on, but you can still take some quick jaunts around. So let's get all of our lights on here. Okay, so as you just saw, we've got our load menu here. So let's load up. The only way I've found to be able to do this reliably is get out the calculator. Let's see. So our zero fuel weight on board right now. Let's see. We want 405,737 minus 253,262 gives us 152,475. Okay, block fuel is 45,054 pounds. This thing absolutely eats gas. Trip touch time 26,320. It is the least fuel efficient plane that I have. Apply load configuration. There we go. Okay. So we'll come down here to the FMC. And we'll do a flight plan initialization. You can't enter this from SimBrief as far as I know. It doesn't work yet, which is fine. We can do it ourselves. I can show you how this thing works. It's a finicky system. The MD-11 is kind of what I would say a mix of Boeing, Airbus, and mad scientist. Things kind of work like a Boeing, and then on the complete other end of the spectrum, they kind of work like a Airbus. And then there are systems that are just completely McDonnell Douglas. One of them being the dial of flap that we'll get to later. 1156 is our number here. Initialize the IRS. We don't have any alternate stuff to worry about. So weight's good, fuel quantity's good, flight plan. So let's see, SID is, we're going off of runway 17 right by a Triton 4, I think. Come on, man. Whoops. Triton 3. I guess that's close enough. And then we'll transition to loose. Insert that. So one of the weird things right off the bat is to input another airway. The way that you do it is you come and you click here, and then you click on your next waypoint here. Like this. So, and if you had an airway, you'd have to click here. Like MEM has an airway coming out of it. We don't have to worry about that, but that's where you would put that in. BWG, next waypoint. I think it's this one. And direct to Mighton. Oops. See, this is the Boeing and me trying to punch stuff in. Mighton. Okay. So, and then we're on our star. Onto 17 left. Transition from MBEL 4. Transition from Mighton. Insert, and we'll worry about the approach later. So one of the other things you got to worry about is the takeoff stuff. So this is where the weirdness comes in. Right now we don't have to worry about it. This is, we'll get to this in a second. We're going to take off, because we're kind of heavy, we'll take off of flaps 28. If you come look at the flaps down here, this is the fun dial of flap stuff I was talking about. For some reason it always starts out like that. So you go flaps up, zeros, which means the slats extend but the flaps don't, which is still weird. And then your next step is dial flaps. So the dial flaps down here, everything from 10 degrees to I think 25 is managed by this dial of flap. Usually I just leave it at 15 as I'm going through it. So what that means is that on when you come into this area, your flap setting is managed by this. And then you go 28, 35, 50 and stuff like that. But it's kind of tricky to get used to. If you're not paying attention, you could end up on like flaps 25 without noticing. So you got to manage that. But we'll do a flaps 28. That's just easier. Packs will be off. So the slope and wind. So each runway has a slope. 99% of the time it's 0. So you would just put up 0. And then your wind, you'll notice that it's not a direction and speed. It's just a wind. And what this wants you to do is it wants you to tell you the calculation for headwind or tailwind. And the way that you get this is by going to a website. I think I found one. Stop. I found one, and you just punch in your degrees and speed, and it spits out a headwind for you to punch in there. So what you would do is if you had a headwind, you would do HD headwind, and then you would put it in, but we don't have one, so we do 0. And then the outside air temperature, let's see, because we're not on live weather, I can't just steal this from a real weather scenario. We gotta punch that down. I can't remember what I put it at. Let's see if we can figure that out. Let's see here. So it's 15 degrees is what we should do. So 15 here. Okay, and then it gives you your V speeds all in here. You don't have to worry about everything. So then you just click here, verify it, and it'll automatically punch it into your PFD over here. So pretty easy once you know how to enter stuff. It took me a solid 15 minutes to figure out this part. The one thing I will say about X-Plane compared to Microsoft Flight Simulator is there's no guides out there for anything. For some reason, whenever you try to ask a question about X-Plane, everybody gets super snooty and just tells you to read the manual. That's one of the more ridiculous things I've heard. If you know the answer, don't tell somebody to read the manual. Tell them the answer and tell them how to find it next time. People can be very annoying, I have found, in the X-Plane community compared to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think it's because it's a little more hardcore. There's a little bit more going on. But it's still ridiculous that somebody could be struggling with a problem and the answer is go read the manual instead of, trying to help them. So you punch in V2 plus 10 here for your speeds. We'll just punch in our final altitude here, and we're taking off 17 right, and that's in a degree. That's 176. Whoa, 176. There we go. Okay, so we are ready for start, and we don't need a pushback, but we still need to start up our APU. And so you start the APU up here. And this is where the weird Airbusness comes in. Because you look at this panel up here, the overhead panel, and you think, that looks a lot like Boeing, or Airbus. And you'd be right, because all this stuff automatically takes care of itself. It disables the packs on takeoff. It re-enables them once you get off the ground. It manages your power systems and everything for you. It's all very automatic up here, which is pretty cool. You don't have to worry about coming up here almost ever. And then you look down and you're like, holy cow, this is all, this feels very Boeing down here. And then you look at the center console and you're like, yeah, that's the most McDonnell Douglas thing I've ever seen, with the dial-a-flap and the crazy, just like how wide it is. That's something I've noticed. A lot of McDonnell Douglas aircraft will have this really wide center console here. And then the FMC is also just very blended between the three. I don't know why the master caution keeps coming on. I wish it would stop doing that. Let's see. So APU is on. We'll turn on APU power. We'll turn on the APU here for our packs. We will turn off external power, and we will come up here and we will get rid of that. One of the things that this does have that's pretty nice is if you're like me and you cannot get better pushback to work at all, it does have its own version of it. It basically just reutilizes the stock X-Plane pushback toolbar, but it's better than nothing. Why does it say battery charging? I've never had that before. I don't know. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start the engines because we can just go straight out. So in order to start the engines, you need to select ignition A or B. I just flip on and off between which one I use. So we'll use A, and then we go 3, 1, 2. So we'll do 3. And the thing about the ignition is it stays on the entire flight. I tried to turn it off after a while on my first flight, and it freaked out on me. So I guess you leave it on. So let's go ahead and get some sound going here. Get that baby purring. I do think it's one of the cooler looking planes. Just those 3 engines are so awesome. It's got a cool profile. So let's come back in here. We're at 27%. We'll get some fuel in. Yes, the cost index is something I always forget. So our cost index is 23. So it does a good job of reminding you actually what the cost index needs to be, or to input stuff that you missed. Usually planes don't do that, especially kind of old ones. That's what's weird about this plane is you look at it and you're like, wow, that's an old plane. You look at the inside, you're like, wow, that's kind of not an old plane. Like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But that is engine 3 started. Let's get engine 1 started, and then we can start taxiing while 2 winds up, if we really want to. And the auto flight system is another thing that takes a lot of getting used to here. We'll work on that as we start taxiing. We've got kind of a quick taxi here. We're just going to taxi across the 18 runways to the other side of the airport to get 17. I guess I could have taken off of 18, but, you know, whatever. All right, 26%. You can do it at 20, but I keep forgetting that. So there's our engines. All right, spooled up. Let's do engine 2, which is the center engine. All right, so we're at 20%, introduce fuel. All right, so we'll come down here to dial a flap, and we'll go through dial a flap. So right now that's flaps 15. We'll go to 28, because that's our takeoff. We'll set spoilers to arm. We'll come over here, we'll set our TCAS. TCAS. Oh man, I'm dumb. Where is it? There it is. We'll just set it on here. So one of the other things is this DFDR. I think it's the flight recorder. That doesn't actually turn on until you've got good engine start and you release the parking brake. So this, if you're worried about this, if you're flying it like I was, that's what that is. It's not going to go away until you're completely done starting the engines and you start taxiing. So, all right, we are done with startup, and you notice everything's kind of off here except for the APU stuff. So we'll turn off APU. We'll wait for this to flip over to the engine power for the packs, flow, and then like Airbus, off means good. And then we'll, we don't have APU power. It already switched from APU to engine power. That's what that blinking was. So we can just turn off the APU now. We can get the taxi light going. We can come down here. It's going to say APU on for a while, APU available for a while. But we will release the parking brake. And this thing has some beastly engines on it, so it's going to start moving on its own. You can see I haven't even put any throttle in yet. Once it starts moving, you need to be real careful with it, or you will find yourself going about 40 knots on the ground. So I set up a little taxi camera here just to help myself. This is a really big plane. It does turn like a wide body, because it is a wide body. But You know, it doesn't. It's a deceiving plane. It doesn't look as big as it actually is until you're taxiing it around and you're like, holy cow, this thing's massive. It's really heavy, especially when you have as much cargo as we do. And if you take a full load of cargo and a full plane of fuel, your maximum takeoff weight is 630,000 pounds, which is extremely heavy. I've noticed on this plane something that we're going to have to work on with our landings is a lot of times I will end up falling out of the sky because I take off the power too quick. You got to have your power. You got to keep that thing up around 60-70% all the way through landing. You can't, it's not like a Airbus or a Boeing where, you know, you get about 100 feet off the ground and you can start reducing throttle and then cut it. You do get to cut the power on this, but it's like more like 20 feet off the ground. If you reduce throttle to try and glide in, say you're going to overshoot the landing zone and you're trying to glide into it, lose some speed, you'll drop like a rock. So this thing, you really need to be ahead of your throttle. You need to be ahead of where the plane wants to go, or you're going to have some serious issues. You see how I haven't been paying attention and we were up to 30 knots. Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. So like I said, we leave ignition on, so we don't really have to do anything after start. It's a lot. Like I said, that's the Airbus in it. It manages a lot of those power systems for you, a lot of the air conditioning, the power. You don't have to put any of your landing altitude, takeoff altitude. That stuff's all in there. One of the things I will mention is if you pick this plane up, when you first start flying it, the profile that's integrated into SimBrief by default is going to be the passenger version. That's just SimBrief being weird. You know, their profiles aren't the best thing on SimBrief, so you will have to go looking. There's one on flightsim.to, I think, and it's a SimBrief profile specifically for the freighter version. Max 25 passengers, max 448,000 pound takeoff weight. So that's what I would use, because the plane is a freighter. You don't get a passenger version, from what I've understood. All the versions that come with the purchase are going to be freighter versions. So you get the cargo doors, you get kind of the windows that have been blacked out, but there's no interior for a passenger version yet. I don't know if that's coming at a later date. I don't know if I'm dumb and I missed it. It's one of those two, probably the latter one. Yeah, there we go, 30 knots again. All right, so this plane does have an auto throttle. It's a weird auto throttle. Basically, you spool up the engines to 70% manually, and then the throttles get taken over, kind of like a Boeing, where they move themselves. It's not like Airbus where they sit in one spot. But you do have to engage the autopilot, engage the auto throttle, spool up to 70%, then the throttle takes over, then on the takeoff run, after you've taken off, then you engage autopilot again to enable the actual autopilot. It's very confusing. Let's go to this view. This view's better for this. You can see how wide this thing can turn if you're not careful. So we actually got this thing going pretty quickly. We've only been going for about 24 minutes and we're already about to take off, which is pretty quick for a plane this big. One of the other things I've been messing around with in Microsoft Flight Simulator has been GSX Pro. I got it. It's okay. It's really finicky, especially with the Phoenix A320. They kind of, because that has its own EFB with its own systems for trucks and what the heck is beeping at me? Oh, that's the I think that's the outer marker. Sometimes I get that here. Oh, the trim. The trim needs to be, yeah, that's the outer marker. Just ignore that. So our takeoff, oh geez, we almost ran off the road there. So our takeoff trim's 6.1. Oops. There we go. Okay. So yeah, the other really weird thing about DFW on this is you get that weird outer marker. You can see it blinking. That's the ILS. It auto-tuned the ILS for 17 right for some reason. So that's why it's giving me this this warning. It says I'm missing my approach, and I say I am on the ground. So yeah, well, like I was saying with the Phoenix A320 and GSX, they fight each other because they both have their own systems for handling ground vehicles and the pushback and stuff. So sometimes it works. Sometimes you're waiting 10 minutes for the fuel truck to arrive. Sometimes it never shows up. I don't know. I haven't tried it with the 737 though. I've only flown it twice. All right. So like a lot of big planes, we need to over-rotate. We need to understeer this runway here so we can line it up. Ooh, is that going to be perfect? I think it might be. Yep. Okay. Let's hit the brakes here. Alright, so let's see. The timer starts automatically, which is another crazy feature. Not even Airbus does that. So what we need to do is we need to hit auto flight, and that turns on the takeoff clamp, but not the autopilot. We need to spool up 50%. And then what will happen is I'll spool up more, and you'll see how they got taken over. That's not me pushing them anymore. And then we go off for takeoff. You know, there's stupid beeping again. Don't worry about it. See how it says bleeds off on the eCam right now? Did that automatically. So we're looking for 144 on the rotate. V1, rotate. So we actually got out of here with a lot of runway left, which is nice. And the thing about this baby is when you take off, it wants to climb. Look at where it's having us in a freaking, we're in a rocket ship right now. Like, it is not joking around when it wants us to take off. It does not want to derate the engines. It does not want us to pitch down. It wants us to go as high as possible, as quick as possible. It's crazy. So once you take off, the other thing you have to do is you have to enable the profile. And that'll scale back on the engines, and that will turn on our so it turned on FMS speed, and that will also turn on our nav once we hit nav. So you have to hit auto flight. Once you're in the air, you have to hit profile to engage the climb profile. You have to hit nav to engage your navigation for your flight director here. And we are off. I don't think I ever turned on any freaking lights. So that's just me being a dummy. So we'll actually turn that off. I was so concerned with the takeoff, I forgot to tell people we were taking off. Okay. Come on. The other thing I've noticed about this plane that's kind of frustrating is how finicky the flight director is. You'll be sitting there and it'll just like all of a sudden go flying to the left, and it wants you to follow it. So we'll go flaps up a notch here. So right now we're actually in the dial a flap mode. And because I have dial a flap set to 15, our flaps are going to be at, or I guess it's at 14, but you can see it's in the dial a flap setting right now. Dude, holy cow. I have the yoke full pitched forward right now. Like, I cannot push the yoke any further forward than I can right now. This is insane. Alright, we'll go flaps up a notch. And there goes the plane back a little bit more. This thing just wants to climb. It wants to go to orbit. Oh my gosh. It won't even go down anymore for me. Alright, let's just, so then the last thing you need to do is hit autoflight again. That turns on autopilot. Okay, so we're at 0 here, but you can still see the slats are out. And that's what 0 means on your flap setting. There's stabilizer motion, of course. There we go. So we are away out of DFW on the way to Louisville. We will get our final setting up on the slats. And let's see, what else do we have to do? Disarm our spoilers. I never set the auto brake. I'm surprised it didn't yell at me about that. So we forgot a lot of stuff. The auto brake is down here. It's kind of hard to get to sometimes. But that's where that is. And it will auto disarm itself. So there's that to worry about. Stabilizer motion. Yeah. So pretty easy takeoff there. Lot to manage with the MD-11. You got to be really on your toes with it. Something I've noticed about this plane is it will just dive bomb. If you're, let's say you're like really low on speed when you engage your autopilot, the thing will just take a nosedive to try and get its speed back. It seems to prioritize your vertical speed over your plane speed on descent, but it prioritizes your speed on ascent versus your vertical speed. And you'll see that when we descend. Like I said, this thing, it does have an issue descending that I've noticed. I don't know how much of that is live weather versus how much of it is the plane itself. But on descent, you can set your speed to be 300 knots and you will still overspeed. The only way that I've figured out how to stop the overspeed is to disengage the auto throttle and manage it myself, because you will be overspeeding on descent and it'll tell you to get the speed brakes out, but it'll still have the auto throttle with throttles at like 45-50%. Instead of, you know, reducing them to idle or anything, it'll still maintain the auto throttle really high without consideration for overspeeding the plane through, you know, you'll be like at 350 knots on descent, and it'll still be like, yo, just like use some speed brakes or something instead of, you know, fixing your throttle. So there we go. Out of DFW. Pretty nice. So yeah, like I mentioned, one of the things that I did have to fix, which sucks. I really hate doing this, but you have to disable the auto, or the auto weather, the live weather in X-Plane 12. It's too much of a hassle to fly these planes and have them constantly wobbling, constantly throttling up and down. It really screws up your descent. It can really screw up your flight profile just because it's not realistic. And I know that Laminar Research has said that they're working on it, but they believe it's still a realistic rendition. And you can listen to pilots talk about that, and they're like, yeah, sure, that sometimes happens, but it's never that extreme unless you're going through a hurricane. And some people don't have this issue, so it might just be a glitch in X-Plane 12 with my live weather, but it legitimately looks like I'm flying through a hurricane or a tornado every time I get to cruise. So we had to disable the live weather. I tried to replicate the weather on the way to Louisville as best as I could based on what I saw on SimBrief, but we'll just see what happens. So this the profile climb, I've noticed the profile, I haven't really run into any airports where there's a lot of constraints. I do notice on descent though, if you're not careful, Say, you know, you're trying to maintain a descent, but you want to slow down a little bit and then re-enable your descent on profile. If you don't hit the profile button again, it will just blow through your constraints, obviously, because it's not enabled on profile. It'll tell you that. It won't tell you that, is what I mean. You know, unless you hit the profile button a couple times and you're sure you've hit it, you'll end up, you know, say you set 3,000 feet as your final altitude before you turn into land, you'll find yourself at 3,000 feet like 10 miles before you need to actually be there. It'll just blow right through your constraints. So, a lot of fun. I do love the airplane. I think it's one of the coolest looking planes, like I said. It's fun to fly. It's got some character to it. It's got some things you need to manage. It's like a blend of new school, and old school. Like, instead of it being like the MD-80 where it's like half and half, it's like 80% new school stuff, but then it's just got a little bit of stuff from like the 80s and 90s where you're like, okay, you know, that's an older plane. Like, this whole panel feels really old. This stuff feels pretty new, and then this stuff feels pretty old. So the screens are all new, which is nice. The auto flight systems are pretty normal. It doesn't come with a tablet, which is whatever. It comes with its own little thing up here. Trying to think of anything else. You can go through the whole cargo compartment if you really wanted to. Like I said, there's nothing back there. One of the things that I have noticed is if you do load some cargo into it with the menu, it loads them up, it puts them in there, and then as soon as the door closes, they disappear. So if you go back in flight, you can't like look at a full cargo bay. It'll just be empty. But all right, so we are getting close to cruise, and we've got a short cruise today. You know, we should be cruising for not super long. 22 miles till we're at top of climb. So not a super long cruise, but I won't make you sit through it. We'll do some time-lapse stuff, and I'll see you guys on descent so we can work on bringing this thing into Louisville. All right, we are back into the descent here. Pretty short cruise. We started our descent just a little bit earlier. I've actually transitioned our approach to 35 right instead of 17 left. This means that we're going to come down and go straight in instead of doing a loop on an RNAV arrival, pretty much. Let's see if this thing will stop clicking. That would be clutch. The speed brake does bug me in this plane. If you're using a axis instead of just a button to increase or decrease the speed brake, it likes to click in and out. It doesn't like to find a groove. The descent's going okay so far. We're not overspeeding yet, which is nice. Usually by now we're at like 350 knots and the plane is screaming at me because it's about to break up. But yeah, just a little bit of speed brake and we're good to go right now. You can see this dot right here. The dot on the descent doesn't seem to work right. It doesn't actually like tell you where you should be on your descent. It just flies straight down to 2400. But the speed indicator seems to be working. So let's go to half on the speed brake. Does that work? Yeah, it seems right. But yeah, see how we're, you know, the engines are spooling up to catch back up to the dot here. But the issue is when you pass this dot, you can see this green line means we're speeding up. Once we hit here, the engines aren't going to spool down enough to maintain that. They're gonna over rev and speed us back up. But we can plug in our ILS frequency here. So one of the weird things about this is the way that you plug in the ILS. So you could put in your frequency in your course. The problem with that is when you do that, obviously ILS frequencies are the same throughout the country and even the world. So it asks you which one to choose. And the quickest way to not deal with that is you can actually just put in the alphabet, the letters for it, like that, and it'll give you the right course. So this is a localizer only, or you can select localizer only if you don't want it to handle the glide slope. But yeah, if you put in, so like, let's try it again. 1110 55 at 350 is what my chart says. So let's try that. See, it's going to give you something weird here. It doesn't know. It doesn't know which one it is, but you can actually just go based off of the letters here if you want to. So there's our course in, and just like that, our ILS is ready to go. We don't have to worry about that. Then, much like a Boeing, or not a Boeing, much like Airbus, it'll automatically tune everything in here, and we don't have to hit the we don't have to hit anything to bring up the localizer and the glide slope. So that's more like Boeing, this part. The way that you enter it is strange, but the way that it pops up right here, it says no lock, no glide slope. These will start popping up as we get into range of the actual frequency. So it appears that the descent issues I was having are due to the live weather, because right now I have the speed brake all the way stowed, and we're not overspeeding. The engines are actually doing a good job of managing it. So that appears to be another one of those issues with live weather and X-Plane, which more and more I'm finding. I don't know why they haven't fixed it. Apparently it's been an issue since September, and they're still working on a fix for it, which is kind of ridiculous. But whatever, I guess they'll get to it when they get to it. Alright, so you can see our descent path here. It's just a nice easy turn in. Don't have to worry about too much besides our speed. As far as our approach goes, we can come down here, and much like a Airbus, it's already set up for us. It's already got our approach and our reference speed. It selected us for flaps 35, which is the second to last setting on the flaps. So we'll just have to manage our speed on descent. This plane goes really quick on descent. You know, we're at 340 knots, which is kind of crazy. Usually planes don't fly that fast. Let's see. Yep. So back to FMS speed. Sometimes it'll click out of FMS speed for a second on descent and then click back into it without touching anything. I don't really know what that's about, but seems to be doing its job. So coming down through 25,000 feet right now. We're still 80 miles out from the airport, so I'll bring you back when we get to more exciting stuff. All right, back in the cockpit. We are just hitting 10,000 feet, so we'll get our lights on. And there's actually the runway turnoff lights are here, which is kind of fun. All right. So we are slowing down, about to make our final left turn onto the localizer soon. We're still, we're still 80 miles out from the airport. But, being under 10,000 feet, we've got to get ready to go here. We did have a little bit of an overspeed there for like half a second. And when it does overspeed, it clicks out of all autopilot stuff. So you will have to re-enable profile. I do have the thrust set manually to 200 here. Right now it wants me at 215. So we'll go ahead and go down to that. Or 250, I mean. Let's see, you have to click down to manually set the thrust. So we're still on auto thrust, but we're just manually setting it so that we can maintain this descent and not be going 300 knots when we try to land. So we're looking for a final approach speed of 157. We don't need to get the speed brakes out yet because we're still so far out. But we might have to start looking at that soon. If we get on localizer and we're still over 200, then we're going to have issues. But yeah, you see how they're not quite idle. It's still keeping them at about 40% and idle somewhere in the 20, 23, 28%. I can't remember, something like that. So the throttles won't ever really go idle on you, which is kind of weird to do. All right, so we're about to make one of, well, not the last left turn, but close to the last turn to get on the final track into runway 35 right here. Yes, got it. Stabilizer motion. All right. Coming down through 7,000 feet. It's still keeping us on profile. It's keeping us, 500 feet per minute descent here. Let's go ahead and get slats out. That'll help us maintain lift without overspooling the engines. And we'll use, I'll set the auto brakes in a second. We'll use auto brake 2, I think. There's no calculator for takeoff or landing. It does tell you like the distance, which is kind of nice. It pulls all this stuff up, but it won't tell you the auto brake distance. It won't calculate that for you, so you kind of got to guess. And 35 right is a 8,579 foot runway. We're not super heavy coming in, but we're still going to use auto brake 2, I think. I can't remember. No, okay, so that does drop the gear. Sometimes I can't remember if this is like a 737 where there's a middle setting to turn the hydraulics off. Don't know why I always forget that. So alright, we're a little, 60 miles out from the runway. Turning in here. Scenery could use some work. I need to look into, like, I don't know if Orbex has some good sceneries. I've been trying to find some on Orbex, but I haven't found like a good mesh. I've just been finding cities. I don't know. There needs to be like a new like photogrammy. I know that there's one for Microsoft Flight Simulator that uses Google Maps instead of Bing Maps to redo the whole world. Just kind of crazy that somebody went through the effort to do that, and it looks, I think, the same for me, but I don't know. Maybe there's one for X-Plane I'm missing. So that's not good when we're level like this. We need to probably drop our flaps a little bit more. We'll do flaps 14 here. Actually, we'll go up to 10. Like that. There we go. So once you're in dial-a-flap mode, between 10 and 25, you've got to use this little dial to actually move the flaps around. Hence the name dial-a-flap. But it makes it kind of awkward if you're just trying to slam through the flaps real quick. You know you can't. The difference between 10 and 28 is huge, so you got to come over here and actually look at it and do it. And there's no way, there's no good way I found to bind it, at least. So now it wants 167. We'll wait on that for a second. Maybe we'll come down to 180 though. While we're descending here, we're not descending too quick. We can take advantage of our slow descent rate to lose some speed. And we'll actually come up to, let's see, let's come over here and go to flaps 15. Or close to it. So that actually drops the flaps just a 5-degree notch. Alright. So we're about to turn on final almost. Still almost 40 miles out from the runway. We'll go to flaps 20, I believe we should do, maybe. Flaps 20 looks good. Let's do flaps 20. 20. Come on, there it is. There's no click spot for it. Like, it kind of just figures it out on itself. We'll do flaps 28, actually. There we go. We're actually 20 miles out. The range is 40, but this ring is at 20, so I'm stupid. So 20.6 miles. We can actually get established on the localizer pretty soon. So the way that the approach land works in this is something I haven't figured out yet. There's no localizer or there's no localizer button. There's just an approach land button. So if I hit this, it arms localizer. And I think it establishes localizer first, and then it establishes glide slope. So you see we've armed localizer. So it's not on it yet. We're still on nav. Until it finds the localizer frequency that we can be on, we'll stay on nav. So I think we can come down here and we can set our auto brakes to setting 2, arm the spoilers, all our lights are good to go. That's pretty much all we got to do. Besides drop the gear and do our final approach speed. It's so nice to fly this without the crazy turbulence of live weather. Instead of it bouncing around on approach like this, you know, obviously no wind is going to make the flight smooth, but it's kind of nice to not have to worry about, you know, is it me messing up the flight? Is it the plane messing up? Or is it the live weather? I know that everything's going pretty much fine. And just look how cool this plane looks, man. It's so cool. I love the design on this this livery I picked up. It's got all the smoke and the grossness and the beat up look of a cargo aircraft. It's been in service for 20-something years. So now we're on localizer. You can see it's trying to establish that. We have landing armed, but it's not found it yet. So we'll turn in on localizer. Still 12 miles out. Once we hit 10 miles, I'll drop the gear. Or I'll start slowing down and drop the gear. And then we can use the new replay tool to see how bad my landing is. I've tried so hard to get good at landing this. It's such a difficult, finicky plane. You have to keep the power in. You have to cut it at the right time. It's just tricky. So it's coming down to 3,000 instead of harming the glide slope right now. Because our final altitude, thank you. There's the airport. There's 35 right here. All right. Inside 10 miles, our final approach speed is 157. Oh, I just flew right past it. 157, drop the gear, flaps 35. I love the wheels here. Alright, there's 2,400. So we should be leveling off here and intercepting the glide slope before we start our final approach here. There's glide slope blinking. Wait for it to go solid. There we are on glide slope. Still looking for 157 here. We're up at 180 still just because of the descent rate to try and intercept that glide slope. So it should be dropping pretty quick. We might actually take over the throttles here. You have to hit it twice. The throttles are weird. So this isn't the toga button. This is the auto throttle disconnect button. And you have to hit it twice to turn off the auto throttle. Yeah, I got it. Turn off the flight director. That's going to be down here. Get some more power in so we don't stall. Come on, spool down. Alright, let's get autopilot off. Again, you have to make sure to bind autopilot disconnect onto your yoke or whatever you're using. And you have to hit it twice to disengage. If you just hit the auto flight button to the right on the MCP, it'll just keep yelling at you. The other way you can do it is just physically look down and click this button twice if you don't want to bind it. Either way it works. But we're losing a lot of altitude here. You can see we're chasing that dot. I just spool up the engines a little bit, come back down on it just a little bit. Get back on center line. Don't want to drop it too much, or you'll end up low. We're ending up a little low off center line. There we go. Now we can decrease. Flare. There we go. Reversers. One reverser. There we go. We floated down the runway just a little bit, but should be fine. All right, there's that. Auto brake off. There's our reversers out. And there we go. Welcome into Louisville. Headquarters for UPS. Pretty good landing there, actually. I'm kind of proud of that one. Floated just a little bit there at the end, but we didn't do too bad with the approach. Turn that off. Get our taxi light on. Let's just come up here and do this. Cool. And because it takes a while to get started, we'll go ahead and boot up the APU so we've got some power when we get there. And we'll turn that off, turn our flight director back on, clear all the warnings, CG disengage. Sure. But yeah, not too shabby. Pretty good landing, if I do say so myself. We'll check the replay here once we get parked up. We'll check our Volanta. Actually, we can do that right now. We can see we landed at 115 feet per minute. That's probably the best landing I've ever had in the MD-11, honestly. That's probably why we floated so much, is I was right there at the end. Just a little bit of float to make sure we didn't slam into the ground. You can see when we came down, you come in pretty hot. Like you think you've got more time than you do. You have to start flaring at about 80 feet. If you start flaring at 50, you're gonna slam into the runway. Even if you pull straight back on the stick as hard as you can at 50 feet, you won't flare in time. You gotta flare just a little early. But we'll park up over here. Nice quick short taxi. One of the cool things about Louisville, this is the UPS hub, so all of the gates are pretty much cargo gates. The gigantic terminal in the middle of the airport is a cargo terminal, as you can see. So it's kind of fun to fly in and out of here. I know Memphis is the FedEx headquarters, it's pretty similar. But we flew the Brown today. We might fly FedEx next time, who knows. Let's get parked up here. Just a little off center line, but that's fine. There we go. All right, let's get the parking brake in. Is our APU available yet? Let's come over here. APU is on. Turn on APU power. Let's turn that on the APU at least. And let's get our fuel off. I do believe it's going to automatically, there's my Volanta telling me we're done. Yep, automatically puts it on APU power. And let's do some replay. So come down here. This is one of the nicest things about X-Plane, is it's just baked into the game already. All right, so let's go find a good angle to watch this from. Let's try the tower view. Here we come. Nice steady descent here. There we go. Actually, we nailed the touchdown zone. A little, there's that float just right there at the end. I'd say that's a greaser. I'd say that is a greasy landing if I've ever seen one. Let's try this angle. This angle's fun. Right at the end of the runway. Here we go. There we go. Just a little off center line. We brought it back right there at the very end. There we go. Let's exit replay mode. Whoops. View. Toggle replay. All right. There we are, parked up. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was a lot of fun for me. I always love flying this plane. It's a lot to manage, but at the same time, it's really fun to fly. There's not too much going on with it outside of the quirky little system. So if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to give a like, subscribe if you want to see more of these. I know I say I'll keep getting back to Tower Simulator, but that game has been frustrating me every time I try to record it. So I think we'll just stick with some new X-Plane stuff for a while. I know that there is a ground handling game demo that just dropped. I might record a video for in a little bit and put that up. But until next time, I will catch you guys later.